The CNN studio in Los Angeles pulsed with energy as the nation tuned in to witness what commentators had already dubbed the Battle of the States. On one side sat Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the embodiment of conservative grit and a relentless defender of his state's booming economy. On the other was California Governor Gavin Newsom, polished and fiery, carrying himself with the confidence of a man often floated as a future presidential contender. The topic was one that cut to the heart of both men's political legacies: economy and immigration. Abbott leaned forward, his calm demeanor radiating steadiness, his Texas drawl ready to strike. "Mr. Moderator, while California is drowning in high taxes, rising crime, and homelessness, Texas is thriving. We've created more jobs than any other state in the past 2 years. Businesses are leaving California in droves and coming to Texas because we respect entrepreneurs, we respect workers, and we don't tax them into oblivion." The Texas side of the audience erupted in applause, stomping boots echoing like thunder across the studio floor. Newsom smirked, adjusting his tie before responding with a sharp edge. "Governor Abbott, let's be honest. Companies may move to Texas for tax breaks, but ask the workers living paycheck to paycheck. Ask the families crushed by rising healthcare costs and failing public schools. Texas is not a paradise, it's a patchwork of inequality. California invests in its people, not just its corporations." His supporters cheered, their claps precise and rhythmic. For them, Newsom was the voice of compassion, the counterweight to Abbott's unyielding conservatism. But Abbott wasn't done. He raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Governor Newsom talks about compassion while Californians flee his state by the hundreds of thousands every year. They're coming to Texas because we offer what California no longer can: freedom, opportunity, and dignity. That's not inequality. That's prosperity." The audience exploded, half cheering, half booing. The clash had begun. The moderator leaned forward, his voice steady as the camera zoomed in. "Gentlemen, let's turn to the issue of immigration. Both of your states are on the front lines of this national debate, but your approaches couldn't be more different. Governor Newsom, let's begin with you." Newsom adjusted his posture, his eyes narrowing on Abbott. "Texas treats immigrants as criminals. California treats them as human beings. We provide sanctuary, healthcare access, and education for children regardless of status, because that's what real leadership looks like. You talk about freedom, Governor, but freedom without compassion is cruelty." The California side of the audience erupted in cheers, clapping and chanting, "California leads," as Newsom flashed a confident smile. Abbott waited calmly, his hand folded on the desk. When the room quieted, he struck back with the force of a hammer. "Compassion without security is chaos. Let's be clear, under Newsom's policies, California has turned into a magnet for illegal immigration, straining schools, hospitals, and law enforcement. In Texas, we don't just talk about borders, we defend them. Because every family in danger, every child trafficked across that border, is the cost of weak policies like his." The Texas side roared in approval, chants of "Abbott! Abbott," shaking the walls. Newsom, clearly ruffled, leaned in sharply. "Governor, don't lecture me about compassion. California's diversity is its strength, and while you build walls, we build communities. We believe America is stronger when it embraces newcomers instead of shutting them out." Abbott's voice lowered, his Texas drawl slicing through the noise. "Communities don't survive without safety, and a nation without borders isn't a nation. California's collapse is proof. Texans choose security, prosperity, and order over slogans, and that's why America looks to us, not you." The crowd erupted into chaos, half chanting for California, half roaring for Texas. The showdown was only escalating. The moderator's voice cut through the uproar, trying to steer the debate back on track. "Let's move to the economy. Texas and California represent two very different models. Governor Abbott, you first." Abbott straightened, his tone calm but firm. Texas is leading the nation in job growth. Companies from Tesla to Oracle have left California's crushing regulations and sky-high taxes to plant their roots in Texas soil. Why? Because in Texas, we believe in unleashing the American worker, not chaining them with red tape. Families thrive when government gets out of the way. The Texas crowd erupted in cheers, stomping and chanting, "Texas strong." Newsom rolled his eyes, shaking his head before leaning in with a sharp retort. "Governor, let's tell the whole story. Yes, some corporations chase lower taxes in Texas, but at what cost? Workers in your state face fewer protections, lower wages, and limited access to health care. Meanwhile, California remains the fifth largest economy in the world, built not just on business profits, but on innovation, diversity, and opportunity." The California side erupted with thunderous applause, banners waving in the air. Abbott didn't blink. His voice dropped lower, cutting with precision. "Governor Newsom, your so-called innovation comes with a price tag hardworking families can't afford. Skyrocketing housing costs, record-high homelessness, and businesses fleeing by the thousands. Californians are voting with their feet, and they're moving to Texas. That's not my opinion, that's the census." The Texas side exploded, drowning out Newsom supporters with chants of "Abbott! Abbott! Abbott!" Newsom leaned forward, his polished smile hiding a flicker of irritation. "Governor, California's strength isn't measured by who leaves, it's measured by what we build. And unlike Texas, we don't build our success on the backs of the vulnerable. We lift them up." Abbott smirked, shaking his head slowly, before replying, "Governor, Texas doesn't just lift people up, we give them the freedom to climb as high as they dare. That's why America's future is being built in Texas, not California." The room thundered again, the clash of visions now unmistakable, Texas prosperity versus California crisis. The moderator leaned in, his voice firm. "Gentlemen, you've both made strong points on policy, but critics say this battle isn't just about economics or immigration, it's about leadership. Governor Newsom, your response." Newsom flashed his trademark grin, eyes narrowing slightly as he turned to Abbott. "Leadership, Governor? True leadership is standing with people, not hiding behind numbers. You talk about jobs, but what about the women in Texas stripped of healthcare rights? What about families at the border torn apart? That's not leadership, that's control. Texans deserve better." The California side of the crowd roared with approval, stomping their feet, chanting "Newsom! Newsom!" Abbott didn't flinch. He leaned forward, calm but sharp, his voice cutting through the noise. "Governor Newsom, spare us the lectures. Californians are living in tents on sidewalks, crime is skyrocketing, and families are fleeing your state in record numbers. If that's your definition of standing with people, then the people are standing somewhere else, Texas." The Texas side erupted, waving flags, boots stomping in rhythm as chants of "Abbott! Abbott!" drowned the room. Newsom raised a hand, voice laced with sarcasm. "At least in California, people still believe in progress. In Texas, progress is a dirty word." Abbott's eyes flashed, his tone low but commanding. "In Texas, progress isn't a word, it's a way of life. We build. We protect. We grow. And unlike California, we don't drive our people into poverty while pretending it's compassion. Texans don't need slogans. We need results. And that's why Texas leads." The roar of approval nearly shook the stage. The clash was no longer just about policies, it was about which man represented the real future of America. The moderator, sensing the intensity rise, leaned in. "Gentlemen, America is watching closely because your states represent two very different models for the future. Governor Abbott, Governor Newsom, why is your vision the right one?" Abbott's calm presence commanded attention. His voice was steady, deliberate. "The Texas model is simple: low taxes, limited government, and strong borders. That's why we've led the nation in job creation for years. It's why families and businesses are moving to Texas every single day. We respect hard work. We respect freedom. And we prove that prosperity doesn't come from Washington, it comes from the people. The Texas side erupted in cheers, stomping the floor as chants of "Texas leads" thundered through the studio. Newsom leaned forward, his polished grin never fading. Let me tell you what the California model is: investment in people. We build the future by funding education, clean energy, and healthcare. We don't leave people behind. Texas brags about jobs, but at what cost? Fewer rights for women, fewer protections for workers, and a government that tells families how to live. That's not freedom, it's control wrapped in slogans. The California side cheered wildly, waving banners as they shouted, "California strong." Abbott shook his head, smirking slightly before delivering the counterpunch. "Governor Newsom, you call it investment. I call it failure. Californians pay the highest taxes in the nation, yet they live with the highest homelessness and poverty rates. Texas families keep more of what they earn, and they live with opportunity, not excuses. That's not control. That's dignity." The Texas crowd roared, overpowering the cheers from the California side. Newsom's eyes narrowed, his tone sharpening. "Governor Abbott, you can spin it however you want, but the truth is this: California leads America into the future. Texas clings to the past." Abbott leaned in, his eyes blazing with conviction. If securing families, building jobs, and protecting freedom is the past, then the past is what America needs. The audience erupted again, half chanting for Abbott, half shouting for Newsom. The clash of two Americas had never been clearer. The moderator raised his voice over the chants, forcing the room back into focus. "Let's return to the border issue. Texas has taken a hardline stance, deploying troops and building barriers, while California has positioned itself as a sanctuary state. Governor Newsom, why do you believe your approach is better?" Newsom leaned forward, his tone sharpened, eyes fixed on Abbott. "Because America's strength has always been its diversity. In California, we don't tear families apart at the border. We don't treat immigrants as enemies. We give them opportunities to work, contribute, and thrive. Governor Abbott's so-called security has left children in cages and families broken. That's not America, it's cruelty masquerading as strength." The California side of the crowd erupted, standing and cheering, chanting, "Compassion now! Compassion now!" Abbott waited calmly, his expression steady. When silence finally returned, he spoke with the kind of force that demanded attention. "Governor Newsom, compassion without order is an invitation to chaos. Texas is on the front line of a crisis you can't even imagine. Every day, drugs, gangs, and traffickers pour across our border. California's sanctuary policies don't solve the problem, they fuel it. Texans understand something you clearly don't: a country without borders isn't a country." The Texas side exploded in chants of "Build the wall. Protect the border." The stomping was so loud it rattled the stage. Newsom shot back quickly, his voice sharp. "Governor Abbott, walls don't solve desperation. People come here because they believe in the promise of America. California embraces that promise. Texas turns its back on it." Abbott leaned forward, his voice low and unwavering. "Texas doesn't turn its back on anyone. We defend every American family, every child, every community, from the consequences of policies that prioritize slogans over safety. Governor, you call it compassion. Texans call it survival." The audience erupted again, the divide sharper than ever. The battle lines were no longer just about states, they were about the very definition of America itself. The moderator's tone was tense, aware of the historic weight of the moment. "Gentlemen, beyond policy, this debate has become a clash of values: freedom, compassion, and security. Governor Abbott, Governor Newsom, how do you define America's true values?" Abbott adjusted his mic, his expression resolute. America's values are rooted in freedom and responsibility. In Texas, we trust our citizens to make their own choices, to build their futures, and to protect their families. We don't smother them with regulations, and we don't drain them with endless taxes. We stand firm on the principle that liberty and security are the foundations of prosperity. Without those, everything else collapses. The Texas side erupted, their chants of freedom. Freedom, shaking the rafters. Newsom's smile was polished but carried an edge of defiance. He leaned forward, his voice rising with passion. America's values are compassion, equality, and justice. In California, we fight for people who are struggling, for those left behind, for immigrants seeking a better life. We invest in education, in clean energy, in healthcare, because America is strongest when no one is forgotten. That is the future, not Abbott's vision of rugged individualism where people are left to fend for themselves. The California side of the audience leapt to their feet, clapping and chanting, "Justice for all. Justice for all." Abbott leaned in, his eyes steady, his tone sharp but composed. "Governor Newsom, compassion without accountability is weakness. Justice without order is chaos. And California's failures prove it. Texans know freedom isn't selfish, it's the foundation of strength. When people are free to succeed, communities thrive. That's not abandonment. That's empowerment." The studio shook with noise, half cheering, half booing, the clash between freedom and compassion tearing through every corner of the debate hall. It was no longer just Abbott versus Newsom. It was Texas versus California. It was two visions of America colliding under the bright lights of live television. The moderator's voice struggled to contain the storm brewing on stage. "We've heard both of your visions, but Americans watching tonight want clarity. Which model truly delivers for working families?" Newsom seized the moment, his eyes blazing. "California delivers because we invest. We invest in schools, in healthcare, in clean energy jobs. That's why our economy is still larger than most countries in the world. Governor Abbott may boast about job numbers, but what good are jobs when families can't afford healthcare, when women's rights are trampled, when inequality runs rampant? California builds people up. Texas tears them down." The California side of the audience exploded in cheers, stamping the floor, chanting, "California strong. California strong." Abbott's face remained composed, his Texas drawl steady but forceful. "Governor Newsom talks about building people up. Tell that to the families priced out of their homes, to the businesses suffocated by taxes, to the hundreds of thousands fleeing California every year for a better life in Texas. That's not leadership, that's failure. Texas doesn't need to tax people into the ground to succeed. We trust our people, and that's why they're thriving." The Texas side erupted in deafening roars, their chants of "Texas strong. Texas strong," shaking the studio harder than before. Newsom smirked, shaking his head as he tried to regain control. "Thriving? Governor Abbott, you lead a state where millions lack healthcare and teachers are underpaid. Your freedom leaves families vulnerable and communities divided. That's not prosperity, it's neglect." Abbott leaned in, his eyes locked on Newsom, his voice cutting like steel. "And yet, Governor, they keep leaving your California for my Texas. They vote with their feet, and every step is a verdict against your so-called progress. The truth is simple, Texas represents the future of freedom. California represents the failure of overreach." The crowd erupted again, the line landing like a hammer blow. This was no longer a debate, it was a reckoning. The moderator, visibly struggling to contain the chaos, leaned forward with urgency. "Gentlemen, this has gone beyond policy into something much deeper. The nation is watching. Governor Abbott, Governor Newsom, what makes your vision the one America can trust?" Abbott's voice was steady, his words deliberate like a gavel striking order into the room. America can trust Texas because we deliver results. While California bleeds residents, Texas grows stronger. While California raises taxes, Texas lowers barriers. We defend freedom, we protect families, and we respect hard work. That's not theory, it's reality. Families are voting with their feet, and they're choosing Texas. The Texas side erupted into chants of USA. USA. Their voices thundered so loudly it drowned out the studio mics. Newsom gripped his podium, his polished demeanor cracking for the first time. His voice rose, sharp and defensive. Families don't flee California because of values, they leave because of Republican fearmongering. We lead in innovation, technology, entertainment, and climate policy. Texas clings to the past while California builds the future. Governor Abbott talks about freedom, but freedom without fairness is just privilege for the few. The California side of the audience roared in approval, shouting, "California leads." Abbott leaned in, his calm a stark contrast to Newsom's fire. His voice cut through like steel. "Governor, if California is the future, why are your people leaving in record numbers? Why do businesses, families, and even your own taxpayers choose Texas instead?" Because they see through the slogans. They know Texas offers what California no longer can: security, prosperity, and hope. The roar from Abbott's side nearly shook the stage. Cameras zoomed in on Newsom, his smirk faltering under the weight of Abbott's words. This wasn't just Abbott versus Newsom anymore. It had become a referendum on two Americas, one built on freedom and grit, the other on promises and programs. The final round loomed, and the tension was unbearable. The moderator's voice trembled as he announced the closing round. "Gentlemen, this is your last chance tonight to make the case. America is divided, why should your vision define its future?" Newsom, clearly rattled but determined, leaned forward, raising his voice above the noise. "California represents hope. We represent diversity, progress, and the courage to face the challenges of climate change, inequality, and injustice. Governor Abbott can hide behind slogans, but the truth is this: Texas cannot lead America into the future. California already does." The California audience erupted in cheers, chanting, "California! California!" Abbott waited, his face calm, almost stern, before leaning into his microphone. His voice was low, steady, but it carried the weight of a verdict. Governor Newsom talks about the future while his people flee the present. California is a warning, not a model. High taxes, high crime, collapsing communities, this is not leadership, it's failure. Texas is where families find freedom, where businesses find opportunity, and where the American spirit still thrives. The Texas audience exploded, flags waving as chants of "Abbott! Abbott!" roared through the hall. Abbott wasn't finished. He leaned closer, his gaze locked on Newsom. "You see, Governor, America doesn't need more promises. It needs results. And while California drowns in bureaucracy, Texas is proving that freedom works. That grit works. That real leadership doesn't come from fancy speeches, it comes from standing firm when it matters most." The crowd thundered, shaking the stage, drowning out even the moderator's voice. Cameras zoomed in on Newsom, his polished smile cracked, his confidence slipping. Abbott's calm had cut through his fury. The debate ended not with applause, but with a roar that echoed across the nation. Texas versus California wasn't just a clash of governors anymore. It was the story of two Americas. And tonight, America had seen both visions laid bare. As the lights dimmed and the roar of the divided audience echoed through the studio, Governor Greg Abbott leaned into the microphone one last time. His tone was calm, his words deliberate, every syllable carrying the weight of Texas pride. America tonight has seen two visions. One that burdens families with higher taxes, more regulations, and broken promises. And another that trusts its people, secures its borders, and unleashes prosperity. Californians are fleeing their state in record numbers, not because they hate California, but because they've lost faith in leaders like Governor Newsom. They've come to Texas because we still believe in freedom, responsibility, and results. The Texas crowd roared, chanting, "Texas strong! Texas strong," as Abbott continued. Governor Newsom says California is the future. But if high crime, homelessness, and endless taxes are the future, then America deserves better. Texas is the model of strength, grit, and opportunity. And tonight, I say this, not just to Californians, but to every American watching: if you want security, if you want prosperity, if you want freedom, you'll find it in Texas. With that, Abbott leaned back, his hands folded, his gaze steady. The crowd exploded into deafening applause. Newsom stood, trying to mask the sting of Abbott's words, but the moment belonged to Texas. The camera zoomed out, capturing the sight of two governors, two states, and two futures. The battle lines had been drawn. And America knew this showdown would not be forgotten.